Hello and welcome back to another episode of Awaken, Heal and Transform with your host, me, Francesca Raffa. Today I am welcoming a very special guest. Again, I say this every single week because everybody is so undeniably special, unique and beautiful. And I am so blessed that I get to invite speakers such as the lovely Laura Beckenham today to come onto the podcast. So Laura and I connected through our virtual tea ceremonies that we have been doing for over a year through lockdown, through a very special lady that conducts these tea ceremonies. Her name is Lyra. And we had been sort of sharing tea in silence through connection virtually for over a year. And I then had the pleasure of meeting this incredible woman a couple of weeks ago, and we shared tea in person. And I just knew that I really wanted to invite her onto the podcast because of her journey, her story, what she does, and who she is. So Laura is a mystic, a writer, an author, and she is the founder of Space Within, where she works with corporate clients, helping to live a conscious life, finding the space within, that time to slow down in order to speed up, finding the balance between spirituality, practicality, and physicality. So through her coaching programs, she offers various different types for corporate clients and one-to-one clients as well. So we're going to find out a lot more about that and what she does, but I'm also very intrigued to find out a lot more about the book that she will soon be launching, called As the Birds Land. And this, I believe, I have had the pleasure again of reading just a snippet of what is in some of the book, and it is incredible. So I just can't wait to dive deep into her inspiration behind her work and find out a lot more about her journey that, again, is one unique, one that is deeply personal to her soul. Like all of us have this purpose here, and I am just extremely grateful to welcome Laura. Hi Laura, thank you so much for joining the podcast today, the Awaken, Heal and Transform podcast. Like I said, I'm absolutely buzzing to have you here, and it's just, I love this blue light that is coming down through the screen.
Not a filter.
Yeah, we don't even know what this is, but it kind of reminds me of the wabi sabi, like this, you know, the imperfection within the perfection. It's just, I love it, and this is very much all that you're about. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm just excited to get diving into your story. So just to recap on how we connected, which is through a very deep passion of ours and one that you use very much in a lot of your work. So tea. We have been doing virtual tea ceremonies with the beautiful Lyra from with Tea Lovers for over a year, really, through the lockdown, and it's been incredible space for everyone to just come together. And it's funny because we formed this connection necessarily not even talking. It was just in that moment and in that space, and I would always be captivated to look at you, and I loved always looking at all the ladies, but yeah, I feel like to connect over something that is so passionate to both of us is quite deep. And obviously you use that a lot in your work. So having connected you through that, we then actually got to meet in person just a few weeks ago, which was an absolute honor. And we shared some tea together. And I got to know a little bit about you and your journey and what it is that you do. So you are the founder of Space Within, and really it is an advocate for conscious living. So I would like to kind of take it a step back before you started Space Within and just share with us openly your journey as to who you are today, you know, coming back to the true essence of who you are, because technically that is what you are living in. So please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Francesca. Always beautiful to share bowls with you. I've had one this morning, probably too hot, but really lovely. Um, Gosh, yeah, it's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. As you were speaking, what came up in me was there's so much that could be said and so much that doesn't need to be said. So I'll say that first.
Mm.
And where I was taken as you were speaking was to childhood, and the fact that I was always like a super, super, super curious child. Like my mum says that she had no problem sending me to bed because I used to ask to go to bed so that I could dream. Because it was like that was a big part of my existence. It was as real to me as living, as like literal day to day awake, as we describe it. So when I look back on my life now, I look at these things that were always in my identity, and I kind of feel, part of my soul journey as well as maybe my ancestral one. So the short story is that was always there, and this, curiosity about the plants and the voices that I could hear, or the people that came and spoke to me in the night, and that kind of stuff. And then via school, university, I ended up in the corporate world, which of course in many ways is very, very different, but actually is a wonderful playground for this kind of work, because boy does it need waking up. And so I suppose in that respect, I was always somebody who was, again, curious, interested in kind of rattling the cage, very keen to look at what we weren't saying as well as what we were, what was possible rather than what was broken, that kind of stuff. And then at the age of about 30, in a corporate job, in a senior leadership position in a very big business, I kind of had this moment of, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? And I know what triggered it was that I had started my professional coach training. And I am not an advocate for badges and accreditations and all that kind of stuff. I believe in rigor, very much so. But I also believe that these professions, for example, that we've now named have always existed. And yet I was doing this professional coach training, and in the context of work, I remember coming back in on a Monday morning, and I ran a big team all over the country and in different parts of the world, and just kind of go, why aren't I doing this every day? Why is the core of what I do not this? Why is this something I do a bit of in my work, but actually I'm not doing enough of? And why am I in one context when I know I am much more alive and therefore much more useful to others when I have varied contexts? So I'm not somebody who gets overwhelmed by variety. I'm somebody who gets enlivened by it. And so, yeah, I kind of was like, oh, I think I need to leave. So when I look back, and I did, and when I look back as well, the other thing that was always present, I suppose, in my life was tea. And not tea as a practice in this, more ceremonial way or meditative way, or particularly tea as a medicine. But actually looking back, I'd always sat with people and drank cups of tea. I'd always gone for cups of tea with people. It was the core of the work that I did, even in corporate business. And so somehow that all has, over the years, and I've been running this organization for about 8 years now, it's taken a while for it to take its shape and, find its form. But yeah, that's the kind of story that led me here, I suppose.
It's incredible that you have, through your corporate journey, understood what it is that you enjoy doing, and then were able to build that sort of strength that you used from your corporate journey into what you do today. And so that transition, then moving into creating space within, how was that for you? How was that? I know you just said you've been doing it for 8 years, and it took a while to settle. How was that for you? And what is it that you do within Space Within? Because I know you work with corporate companies as well, don't you, now?
Yes,
To
yeah.
back.
Yes, on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think, a few things I will name. I love the transition. I know there are a lot of stories around it's really tough, and it is, but I loved it. I felt so alive. I love to feel like on the edge of, I don't know what this is, and I don't know where it's going, and I don't know what is happening, but I'm alive. It was a very visceral experience. In honesty, it took a couple of years for it to, I didn't even name it Space Within initially, because I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I needed the freedom to find what it was. And in the beginning, I in simple terms, kind of sold what I knew I could do.
Yeah.
So I had a background in like people change and sort of big organizational change. So I did more consultancy, let's say, in that kind of space, because it was what I was known for. And it brought me connections with people, an opportunity, and cash and energy and identity and all of the stuff that sort of moves through. I think that, life force stuff that needs to come into a business as an entity in order for it to breathe and begin to take its shape. And what started to become increasingly clear was the work that I loved was the slower, stiller. So I talk about calming down to wake up.
Yeah.
So what I do in this work is a mixture of things, lots of things underpin it, family constellations and inherited family trauma, that kind of angle of the work, and the idea that what's happened before us, we bring it with us. I'm interested in things like epigenetics and what we hold in our body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in sustainable business and conscious capitalism, let's say, which I appreciate is a bit of an oxymoron in many ways. But the truth is that big businesses. So I predominantly work with either very large or fast-growing businesses, names that we'd all recognise, but I won't share those today. With people who happen to occupy very senior positions in those businesses. And I don't say that from the place of like, oh, I work with really senior people. But the truth is that these frameworks exist, these structures exist, and the work I do with these people, either one-to-one or in teams, is really centered around two things, I suppose. One is the calming them down aspect, which I can say a little bit more about. And the second is what it's for, which is so that they wake up to the world. Like, I'm very open with clients. I'd love you to go home from today feeling calmer, more peaceful, more sanguine. And I'm equally okay if you go home feeling agitated and a bit rattled, because I know their system can hold it and I'm safe enough for them to do that work with. But that means that they might do something different with the position and the privilege that they, and the power with a small p that they have in these systems that are an implicit part of the fabric of our lives at the moment. They're not going to not exist in the next, maybe, who knows, but in the next 10, 20 years, organizations like that are going to exist. So if I can support people in them to work and live in a more conscious way, better connection with their self, their body, themselves, each other, the world around them, then for me, that's good work. So that might sound a bit nebulous, but that's it. No. And in practical terms, it's basically we drink cups of tea, we talk, we share silence, what we might call healing, ancestral stuff, a lot of ancestral stuff, current kind of embodied experiences. We're asking big questions. We're talking about connection to nature. We do it in nature. We drink a lot of tea, sit on a lot of benches. And then they go to their work in the world and they have a better conversation around the board table and around the dining table.
It's truly, truly beautiful. I love the calm down, wake up, because one of my favorite quotes is, we need to slow down to speed up. And that is basically what you are doing. And through what you mentioned before about tea and how you've always, it's funny because I never actually thought about it like that. I always knew that if I ever wanted to have a chat with a friend, I'd always get a cup of tea, but let's go for a cup of tea. And it's also always a big part of my life as well. But that's why I see it as the true connector. But I never actually thought, oh yeah, that was always what I used to do. And so I love how you bring that element in, because as we know, with tea, it is such a simple practice, but there is so much beauty in that stillness, and it is always the quietness where the wisdom sort of comes up, but it's so subtle that you don't even notice that it's happened until maybe way later.
Yes.
And so, like you were saying, you with your clients, you're slowing down, you're in nature, and then they go into the boardroom. They might not even notice that there was a shift happening during that moment of stillness, but it's there and it shows up when it's needed the most. And
Absolutely.
that's, yeah, just really, really incredible. I really love the work that you do.
And you know, tea, Francesca, is so, as we know, it's so accessible. It's exactly what you've said. It's a bit stealth-like, I think, in that way. And again, I'd never thought of it like that. And there's certainly no like hidden agenda in it. I'm very, you know, open and above the line. We'll sit on benches and we'll drink tea. It'll settle you down and probably wake you up. You know, that's the kind of vibe. But I joke with one of my teachers, one of my family constellations teachers in America. He says, you turn coffee people into tea people. People come in like, oh, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't drink coffee because I don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the kind of movement. And there's also something, not all of them at all, but a lot of my clients are men,
Mm-hmm.
or would identify as male.
Mm-hmm.
And even the people that don't identify as male that I work with would openly name and be in touch with their masculine energy. There's a lot of masculine energy in those kinds of environments. We know that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something so simple about tea and the embodied nature of it and the tactile nature of it that really suits that. And yet it brings a softening. And in my experience, we don't necessarily sit for 6 bowls in ceremony because that's not always going to work or is possible or needed. But just having a couple of bowls on a bench, there's a movement. And it is, like you say, subtle and yet, you know, massive in its possibility.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And what is your journey with tea then? So obviously it was part of always what you've done, but how did you trans sort of get into the more ceremonial aspect of it?
Yeah, yeah. So I always begin by nodding to my heritage, which is that clearly I'm from the northeast of England. We drink a lot of tea, and I have Irish ancestry also behind me. So there's just tea. You know, tea is a thing. And so it has always been there. About 4 years ago, I was in Hong Kong with a very dear friend and colleague of mine, Natalie. Interestingly, we run a program in corporates called Slow Down, Step Back, See More.
Mm.
And she said she had recently kind of come across the practice of ceremonial tea. And she said, do you fancy drinking tea with one of my friends and teachers? And I was like, yes. And so my first bowl of ceremonial tea, I mean, talk about blissful. It was up Victoria Peak in Hong Kong,
Mm.
under a pagoda, served by a wonderful woman called Rachel, who lives in Hong Kong and practices tea over there. So it was via Natalie. Rachel served me my first bowl in this way, many bowls, up the peak. And I just was like, oh, okay, where has this been? Where is this? Where can I access this? And then I came back to London and found Lyra. And I had never, that hadn't crossed my path, which also doesn't make sense because I was tapped into a lot of those circles, let's say, sound healing and breath work, and went to ceremony with Lyra like a week after getting back from Hong Kong and was like, okay, I'm in. And then from that developed my own practice, just kept drinking tea. And you know this because you are absolutely Mrs. T, you're Miss T, in the way of, it's a personal practice before it can become a shared practice. And sometimes I think, gosh, have I only been drinking tea in this way for 4 years? Maybe it's too soon to be serving tea to others or sharing tea. So it has to be bolstered by other things, doesn't it? It's not just a thing that you do. It's a way of being. It's I think, an expression of something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just drank lots of tea, in short, and did lots of teaching,
Yeah.
and training with people who have walked the path before me, is how I would describe it.
Absolutely. I feel like tea is a gateway. I mean, for me, in many ways, it was my gateway into unlocking my truth, actually, in so many ways, something that had been resistant and hidden, or I was trying to keep hidden for so long. And I think that's what is so special about tea, is that it's almost like it literally that sound, but subtly, like we were mentioning. And so when you say calm down, wake up, it really does.
Yes.
Boy, does it. Like, you wake up to a remembrance of so much more, and the way you view the world is just, it just changes massively, because it is no longer about your place in the world, but it's more about your place in the collective reality of um, a higher evolvement of what
Yeah.
we are, and we are one part of that. And when
Yes.
we understand that piece that we play in the puzzle of the grand scheme of the ever-evolving universe, we suddenly see things differently. Those little things that we may have got annoyed about are no longer are no longer a big deal. And to have that in place like you do in the corporate world is so important, because I know when I used to work in corporate, I would get so caught up in the smallest thing, and it would be like, you'd think the world's come crashing down, or it didn't happen. And all of those thoughts that go through your mind are just so irrational. And so
Right.
they're just so irrational, and it's just not it's not helpful to anyone. It doesn't help you, it doesn't help anybody else. And
Fully
definitely
agree.
the business. So to
Yeah.
bring that conscious living into corporate is so important, and that's exactly where it needs it more. So like I said, again, I will say again, but I honor the work that you do. And you also teach yoga, correct? So you also bring in an aspect of movement.
Yeah.
So how does that
Yeah.
how do you combine the two, the movement and the stillness, which I
So
love?
I only teach parts of yoga. I don't teach public classes, but have trained in various aspects, particularly the softer practices like yin
Mhm.
and yoga nidra. It's just kind of it's woven in, I suppose. I mean, sometimes I explicitly do it. Sometimes I'll say, shall we close with a meditation? Shall we begin with a meditation? Um, Definitely less movement orientated at the moment, interestingly, in my work. Partly because I feel that, although it's very embodied, so what I'm curious about is people understanding that stillness is an embodiment practice. It's not a passive practice, that this active sense of being in stillness. Yin yoga is a movement, so yin is, as you'll know, but for our listeners, it's a soft practice that's about holding postures over time. And we talk about three things: coming to the edge in the posture, not going over it, not pushing past it, but coming toward it, touching in on it, and then coming to stillness in the face of that, and then staying there and seeing what happens. And the movement is one of a melting. So I'm at the moment really dabbling with that and weaving that in a bit to the work. I run a public program. I don't run many public things for capacity really, but I run a public program called The Sanctum, and it's rooted in tea and meditative work. And we sat in circle on Tuesday and closed with a guided yoga nidra body scan, just a small portion of a full yoga nidra practice. And what people say is it's just a softening, it's an opening in the body, and what that enables to happen is energy moves. As we know, stuckness shifts its quality or moves place, or something new can come in. So I suppose I work in service of flow. That's one of the ways I would describe it. Sometimes that's movement based, more often it's subtle embodiment practice.
Lovely.
Yeah. But I do often say to people, we are more than heads on sticks. This is one of the phrases that I say a lot, and because of Zoom, no offense, but it's like turned into like, I've got a body, feel this part, feel your bottom on the floor or your feet, go like this, move side to side. Doesn't have to be like that, because that's the body, but the expression of that in work and the world is that we just look here, we just look here, and we forget about all of this, and that's really dangerous, right? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff goes on in classes and in programs and stuff.
What's just come up for me when you said that was, that game Guess Who, when you had the heads and
Are you wearing a hat? Are they wearing a hat?
Yeah, and you're flipping that. Oh my gosh, that is so funny. But you're right. Yeah, we do live in such a mental space, and we need to embrace the combination of the mind body, and ultimately with everything that you do, like you just said, it's creating space in the mind, space in the body.
100%. And tapping into planes of existence that aren't just what's right in front of my face and what is forward. You know, ancestors behind us, things that are back, the people who walk the path first, you know, the stuff that's going on around us, community, connection, nature, what's under our feet, the earth, the soil, you know, the sky above us, spirit. For me, this work is really about opening up to all of the dimensions, not just this that's here.
Lovely. The 360 movement. Wow.
And fourth dimension too, but yeah.
Absolutely. All the dimensions.
Yeah.
Right. Now I must get into this. Your book.
Yes.
Your book. Oh my goodness. Please tell us a little bit about this and your inspiration behind where it's come from, the birds.
Yeah. Do you know, this is the first time I've had a conversation out loud about it, Francesca. So I will remember this moment forever for many reasons. But thank you for asking, and for being somebody that I felt I wanted to share it with as well. It really touches me. Yeah. So I have, unbeknown to me, I had been writing a book for the last few years. I didn't know that. I was doing a lot of writing classes with a wonderful teacher of mine, Victoria Erickson. Her work's beautiful. She's a poet, and she does guided practice where she offers prompts, very embodied work. And we write to her prompts. And I've been on retreat with her, and a wonderful yoga teacher, and, you know, getting into the body and writing through the body. And these things kept coming out where I was thinking, they feel a little bit like they're connected, but I'm not sure. Is it fiction? Is it like me in a past life? I don't know, but I'll just keep going. And then I was in a family constellations program, and in short, woke up in the night. I mean, this story is wild when I tell it. I know it's not here in the context of our kind of existence, but out in the world, I know people are like, yeah, right. And I'm like, I know, yeah, right. True. That I basically woke up in the night and could hear a woman crying. And like, it wasn't me and she wasn't there, but the energy of something was there. And I wrote a piece. So I woke up and just wrote, and I would write these pieces in like 3-4 minutes that just completely like come through. And shared it then with the next day with the group in this family constellations group that I was in. And suddenly thought, these pieces are all connected. And what I realized over a process of time with various teachers, my astrologer, you know, various life situations that I was in, that it was all the same voice. And that it was I was given a year in a dream, 1571, and that she is a woman from 1571. And in language that we would understand in modern day, she was a witch and was living at a time where, as we know, lots was going on. The European witch trials reached their peak in the early 1600s. The East India Company was born in 1600, and within 50 years or 20 years or something, it was 80% of the world's trade was going through, you know, the East India Company. And that's here, right here on the river where I live. And somehow this person, this woman, I call her the Muse, was passing stories forth to me of the things that were happening then. And what I've since learned is that when the women particularly, but the magic people, the alchemists, were forced to go inside and take human form because their life was at risk, they were being burned alive or persecuted, the magic, they gave the magic to the birds. This is what she tells me. They gave the magic to the birds and put the magic inside the birds so the birds could keep it safe. And that the birds are now landing and bringing the magic back and asking people like us to welcome it and to bring forth this old wisdom in new ways. Okay. So that's what it is.
You get chills.
Yeah, me too. And so it's kind of, I've heard people talk about channeling before, but it's not as, and I was like, yeah, okay, I know people that do that and I know it's real, but I haven't had an experience. It's not that per se, because she doesn't talk to me, but I feel her presence, and then I can write these pieces. So I know you've read a couple. And yeah, there's stuff around like the questions that we're really, you know, I guess exploring, struggling with, passionate about in this current life. How do we get better equity? How do we share more? How do we be in more contact with the land? How do we honor the people that have gone before? How do we speak truth to power? How do we, each have an equal right to a place? How do we relate to each other? How do we bring up our children? All of these questions that are super modern questions, and yet we were asking them then. So somehow it's a baton pass. So I've been capturing them. I looked back and realized that I had already written like 95% of the pieces. So this summer has been me spending time collating them into a collection. And then I'm going to be publishing that as a self-published book in October, and doing some sort of sharing circle. Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to launch it on Samhain, Halloween for ish around then, as we sort of drop into the dark half of the year. So yeah, it wasn't ever intentionally write a book. It somehow things are coming through me. People that I've shared it with seem to find it useful. It stops us a little in our tracks, I think, and makes us go, okay, what do I need to look at in my world in service of something bigger? So yeah.
Wow, I cannot wait. And what I love is that there was no force to that. It was all flow, it was all ease. You didn't even know what was happening. You just wrote what you felt in your body for your own sort of reference, and realized the pattern, noticed the synchronicities between the pieces, and wow, how amazing we get to share this wisdom. And I love specifically what you said about how the birds are now landing, and it is time for us all to wake up. And I believe that your writing and through your words is going to really do that for so many. So
thank you, Francesca. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's a gift to the world. It's just come through me, really. So I kind of need to own my part. But when people say, oh, you've written a book, I'm like, well, I was never being the person that wanted to write a book or was writing a book. It's just somehow a collection of stories has been written and has been expressed and wants to be shared. And I think there's a lot of spoken word element to it as well, because we can get a little bit hung up on what's on paper, I think, sometimes, and that's a bit risky too.
Completely. Thank you so much. Like I said, I can't wait for that to come out. And Laura, for all of my listeners and all of the listeners today, where can people connect with you and how can people find you?
Yeah, thanks, Francesca. So Instagram, laura.beckingham. If anybody is boring enough to use LinkedIn, then I'm on there too. Although it's an enlivened platform these days. There's a lot of debate on there, actually. My website, which is spacewith-in.com, and I have a couple of podcasts as well, which Calm Down, Wake Up is probably a good place to start. That's guided meditations and yoga nidra. So if you need a good sleep, then that's a good place to meet me. I've been told I have a voice for sending people to sleep, so I shall take the compliment from that and nothing else.
I think I would say it as in very soft, that makes people listen and want to know more.
I'll take it.
Wow, thank you so much. I'll put all of this information in the show notes anyway, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you. I've really, really loved this so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Francesca. Appreciate it.